Good morning. My name is Michael Gramlick. I'm the Assistant Fire Chief and also the Director of Metro Communications. Metro Communications is the Sioux Falls and Minnehaha County's Public Safety Answering Point, or PSAP. Our team of just under 60 individuals responds to 911 calls for service and dispatches first responders across the Sioux Falls area. At about 6:58 last night, we had a significant downtime or outage. Our 911 services were out until approximately 9:10. Again, at approximately 10:14 p.m., we had an additional outage which lasted until about 1:56 in the morning. Along with other cities across the state, we were without 911 services for approximately 6 hours. I know how important safety is to you, obviously to me as well. An unplanned disruption in 911 services is never ideal. However, our preparations in advance and our ability to adapt quickly locally ensured that essential public safety services were continued throughout the entire outage. So during that outage, we had approximately 522 calls for service. And to our knowledge, throughout the outage, we were able to identify each call and follow up with them as we would regularly. Following awareness of the outage, the city issued communications to the community, prompting them to call our admin line, 605-367-7000, or they were able to text 911 throughout the process. So we had both options available throughout the outage. We are fortunate that we're immediately aware of all outages, as simply put, things just don't work the way they should, which then that allows us to begin our troubleshooting. So the way that functions, it's not just an on or off switch. We have different outages different ways, and we have to figure out what is actually impacted before we can communicate effectively to the community. Last night's outage not only impacted the Sioux Falls area, but also appears to be statewide and impacted several other states across the country. This is similar to the event in April. We received a report from our contracted provider, Lumen, that the cause of the outage currently is reported as a result of damage to network infrastructure from the Texas hurricane, the storm in the Texas area. We will continue to work with the state, as is our standard process, and we will look to them to provide further updates. With that, I'd be happy to take any questions you have. Go ahead.
I heard something about that there was also an issue of a line in Kansas City that was knocked down or something, and that might have caused the power outages. Is there any validity to that?
From what we have, I've not heard that one. The only thing that we have from Lumen currently is that they're attributing it to the storm damage in Texas.
What time did the public safety alert go out, and what's the process for sending that out?
Yeah, so the WIA alert, as we call it, is similar to the weather alerts and other alerts that we're able to use through that federal system we have. It went out approximately an hour and a half after we started, and reporting and explaining that troubleshooting process. Obviously, it's dangerous for us to send out an alert that doesn't tell people what they're going to do. So we worked through a process. So imagine all the different ways that a person could contact 911, all the different phone lines, voice over internet, landlines, cell phones. We have to work through what works and what doesn't before we can put out an effective message. So there was actually, as there was last time, an entire email chain with every PSAP in the state, and everybody's reporting what is and isn't working. We were able to determine for the Metro Communications that our admin line was working for all types of phones. Additionally, text to 911 was working. So once we were able to confirm that, we sent out a WIA that goes through our it's called an Everbridge system, and that drove people both to the 367-7000 number, which is our admin line, and text to 911 was through our social media platforms.
So the alert, as came up on at least my phone, says to report an emergency in Sioux Falls, please call the number, visit siouxfalls.gov for updates. I had a lot of people tell me they found the message somewhat confusing as to why exactly they were getting it. Can you talk about, I guess, why is that the message you send out? Is there a reason to not say there's a 911 outage directly in the message?
Yeah, very fair question. Honestly, typically when we use these WIA alerts, there's more like typical events. Usually they're used for weather alerts and something similar. We're leveraging this platform for what for us is a new emergency. We haven't had these types of outages only in these last two events that we've had. So we're kind of working through what is the most effective communications. The last time we had it, just to let you understand, the more we gave, the more confusion there was again. So we're just trying to figure out how to titrate that properly and get that streamed as best we can.
Would that be
The same answer to why didn't another message go out at 10:40, you said, for the second outage?
It actually wouldn't be the same answer. So the answer for that would be, we have that emergency. When 911 isn't functioning, we need you to know that there's an alternative. But we also have this concept of alarm fatigue. We don't want to use that. We don't want to overuse that process. So when we get to that 11 o'clock mark at night, a lot of people are already in bed. When we get there, both of those options work. So let's take last night's outage. I've told you to call 367-7000 or to text. When the services come back up, those functions still function properly. So no one's left in the cold, right? No one will be left out. So we can allow that to continue. We don't have to create another concern about the WIA alert. And then in the morning, like we're doing today, we can let you know that all things are back to normal and you can go back to 911. But nobody gets left out if we manage it the other way, and we don't overuse that WIA alert, which is important to us.
Do you have a breakdown of text messages received versus non-emergency calls?
I don't yet, no. This one didn't seem to skew that way. Originally, we did, and we always do, I should say always, the 2 times that we've had to do this, the alert does bring a lot of traffic, and to be very direct, it's non-emergency traffic. They're confused about the alert, or they want more information. We expect that call volume to rise, and we manage that. For perspective, that call volume that we had during the period last night was roughly half of an average day's call volume. So we did see it rise, but fortunately for our team, I mean, we're well run there. So they met all of their criteria, even for answering times during a surge like that. So that's a good thing for us to see during something like this.
Sounds good. I do have 3 more questions.
Yeah,
if
it's
that's
okay.
So last time it was unprecedented. You guys said that you learned a lot. Every organization that I talked to in the state said that they learned. What did you guys learn, do differently this time around?
So it's probably important for me to describe how the system works. So this isn't a thing that we get to manage locally. So this is it's probably best to think of it as a larger infrastructure concern. So imagine if the power goes out in your home. You have very limited options, right? You could provide a backup generator. That isn't a thing that we can do locally. So this is an infrastructure, a network infrastructure system for communications. It's managed at a state level through our 911 coordination, and then it is through the service provider Lumen. When we have local concerns, we have a local network problem, we have equipment that's within our server room that isn't functioning, we have a dedicated team that can jump in and fix that. When we lose service to the 911 core, we are completely cut off. We don't have options there. So that's why you see us, which we did learn, we can leverage different lines that work. As you can imagine, we're also still continuing to build out what are other options that are outside of our admin line in the event that that would fail. So they were unprecedented. We haven't had an outage like this in the 5 years that we've had this vendor. And typically speaking, going back in history, we just haven't had these types of impactful outages. But it's causing us to look at our redundancy completely different. And how do you manage when you have, in essence, an infrastructure that shuts down? How do you manage that locally so that you can continue to provide the services you're responsible for?
So you guys are sort of planning ahead that this is going to happen more often.
We don't want to believe that this is a regular occurrence, but our job is to plan for those occurrences. So yes, that is what we're actively doing. And it's important to note, Jason Husby, who's the 911 coordinator, he has been very much engaged in these processes. They are looking at all types of different redundancy systems, not only at a PSAP level, like a local level, but at a state level as well. So I am pleased with what we're seeing there, because this is just one of those problems you hadn't seen before, and now we're all working collectively across the 27 PSAPs along with the state to figure out what would work best.
Are we going to see a complaint of any form against Lumen? I mean, I know it was Nebraska. They've had several 911 outages in the last year as well, and they just filed a formal complaint against their provider. Are we going to see anything like that?
I can't speak to that, but I do know that that's at least been discussed. It's kind of just a standard contract enforcement type thing that goes out, and really that would be handled at a state level, not at an US level. We don't have that contract, so the state would do that.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah.
I heard a few people say that when they did use the alert that came to their phone, they couldn't get on the city website. Was there a problem with that?
There was. So if you can imagine, we sent out a WIA alert to everyone in the area. That knocked down the website. That was a lot of traffic that was drawn to that website. We didn't at the time understand how that traffic would impact the website. We now have learned what will need to be done in the future so that when we do drive traffic to that website, we don't lose it.
I apologize if you've already mentioned this, but were landlines still able to call 911?
Actually, I don't. Is Amy in here? Yeah. Landlines were, and I apologize, there's literally a matrix. It's like Verizon could do this, but couldn't do that. You know, all of the different options were there. That's why we had both the 367-7000 number and text, because some cell phones would text through, and a landline still was available to go to our admin line.
Okay, so it was the phone calls from cell phones were the major issue.
It's all over the map. There wouldn't be a singular explanation for how one center was different from another. So it's actually a great question for you to ask, because it really does illustrate how difficult the troubleshooting is, not only at a singular PSAP, but at a state level. Because of the complexity of how these networks interface, there's just a ton of different options that each PSAP has to work through, and then that's how you create your messaging to try to help your public get to the right place. Yeah, and it's all happening fast, right?
Yeah. So a couple of questions, just in response to what somebody else has. So if you lose the 911 core, like what kind of complaint do you even have if it's related to like weather and, you know, something that's kind of just out of the control of Lumen?
I mean, I appreciate the question, but in terms of contract compliance and how they would lodge a complaint, that's just not knowledge I have.
Okay. No, I just wanted to ask. And obviously, as we know, there was outages, in other parts of the country and in the state. I've been made aware that Mitchell lost power, Rapid City lost power. I know you're working on a city level, but are you aware of some of the other areas, maybe even around Sioux Falls or in the state, that also lost power?
So again, anecdotally, because we sit on in essence, there's a giant email chain that goes on during these events. It looks like the bulk, if not all, of the PSAPs, of which there are 27 in the state, experience an outage. I do want to make sure, because it's important, it's not a power outage, though. So you had just referred to they lost power. They don't lose power, they lose connection to the 911 service in some form or another. That makes sense? I just want to clarify that.
I misspoke.
No, totally okay. I just want to make sure that that's clarified. It does appear by all accounts that this was, for us, a statewide outage. And then again, as I spoke to earlier, I'm seeing reports just like you would see on the news that there looks to be, I think it was 6 or 7 states so far that are reporting similar outages. So eerily similar to the April event that we had. Any other questions? All right, well, Parks is up next.
All right, good morning. I'm Bryan Peterson, Urban Forestry Specialist with the City of Sioux Falls. Today I'm excited to share with you that the U.S. Department of Agriculture awarded the City of Sioux Falls a $3 million grant. It will be used over the next 5 years to increase equitable tree access within our city. Through the Forest Service Urban and Community Forestry Program, authorized by the Inflation Reduction Act, the USDA is awarding more than $1 billion in competitive grants to fund urban forestry programs. We informed City Council last week that Sioux Falls Parks and Recreation will use the money to execute what we are calling the Community Assistance Program. With the Community Program, trees will be planted on the street right-of-way with the permission of the budding property owners and at no cost to them. As we plant trees, we'll work to increase tree diversity, to increase forest health, and reduce the impact of forest pests as seen with Dutch elm disease and emerald ash borer. The community program is committed to maintaining the trees for 2 growing seasons to ensure their survival and ultimately the success of the program. After the 2-year period, the abutting property owner will assume care and maintenance of the new trees. Grant funds can only be used within qualified census tracts as specified by the USDA. These tracts were identified using U.S. Census data, which considers factors like unemployment, energy costs, and disability. The Community Assistance Program will focus on planting about 2,500 new trees within disadvantaged tracts, which encompass 24,000 households spanning 25 square miles of Sioux Falls. We will start this summer by surveying qualified census tracts to identify available planting sites. From 2025 to 2027, identified residents in these areas will be contacted for an opportunity to have a tree planted in their neighborhood. The program will conclude in 2028 with final tree maintenance and assessment. This is a tremendous opportunity to restore Sioux Falls urban forest. Emerald ash borer affected over 40% of the trees within the right-of-way starting in 2018. The city proactively removed untreated ash trees to prevent public safety hazards on city property and the street right-of-way. EAB has significantly impacted Sioux Falls ash trees, particularly in disadvantaged neighborhoods on the north side where the infestation began. These communities often lack the resources to manage EAB with treatments and are left to remove and replant trees. The community tree program directly addresses this disparity by restoring tree cover where residents may need assistance. Planting trees is an investment. Each tree roughly costs $1,200 to plant and maintain. Beyond beautification, trees play a vital role in improving air quality. Studies have shown that trees in communities are linked to improved physical and mental health, lower temperatures during heat waves, and even new economic opportunities. This funding will help the city support projects that increase tree cover in disadvantaged communities, provide equitable access to the benefits of nature, and deliver tangible economic and ecological benefits to Sioux Falls. With that, I'll take any questions.
What kinds of trees will you be planting?
For that, we will assess the trees that are currently within the community so that we can make educated decisions and select trees that will add diversity to those areas.
So when you say the project would conclude in 2028, that's when the abutting property owners would then begin their care for the trees?
So it'll start with planting of the tree, and then it'll be 2 growing seasons worth of maintenance. After that 2 growing seasons maintenance is completed on that tree, that is when the property owner will assume care and responsibility for that tree.
So that could depend on what year the tree is planted in,
It
potentially.
depends on what year it's planted.
Okay. And then when you talk about doing these surveys, I assume it's a little more complicated than looking at where an elm tree got taken out and saying, all right, let's put one right there. So I guess what's a high level explanation of how you decide where a tree goes in the city?
So all of the trees that get replanted back into the boulevard have to adhere to parking strip regulations. All those regulations are listed on our website, and the biggest priority with those are public safety. So for example, we don't want a tree planted within 30 feet of the corner of an intersection. That is to maintain visibility for traffic and pedestrians to make sure no one is getting either T-boned or hit within our intersections. We want to maintain a certain distance from fire hydrants to make sure that our firefighters are able to access those hydrants in the case of an emergency and bring water into their vehicles. And we also want to make sure that we're leaving visibility for traffic signs, stopping signals, stuff like that.
I just have a couple questions for you really quick. First of those is you mentioned different businesses and things. Are there certain communities where, or neighborhoods, I guess, where these trees will be planted?
So this program outlines by census tracts. So it's using that U.S. Census data to identify specific tracts. Those tracts do cover multiple different communities within the area. That information will be available shortly when we put out a map of kind of the project area.
Perfect. And then second question is there any like permissions that you guys have to go through, or papers that you guys have to go through with different businesses and things and property owners when you do this?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, we'll start by reaching out to the abutting property owners. As specified, care and maintenance is the responsibility of the abutting property owner for trees in the right-of-way area. So we do have to gain their permission in order to plant a tree in that zone. So we will identify available planting sites first, then reach out to abutting property owners via a letter. And if they decline the planting, we will move on to the next available planting site.
You have any guesstimation? I'm sure it's hard to, but you mentioned the price of planting a tree. I'm guessing that it's different per tree, per area, per whatever. Do you have a guesstimation on about how many trees can be planted with this one grant?
So with this one grant, we are estimating, and again, an estimate is about 2,500 trees that we'll be planting with this single grant. All right, if I don't have any more questions, thank you all for coming.